All right, today we're going to learn a little bit about making optical illusions. So an optical illusion is creating an effect that looks three-dimensional or that changes when it's not. So like if you look at this one, this is the infinite spiral. So it looks like it's receding back and like you could put your hand in it, it's three-dimensional, but it's flat, okay? Some other famous optical illusions. We have the face base. Maybe you've seen this before. Depending on what your eye focuses on, the positive space, the vase, or the negative space, the faces that are created by the vase. Another one here is hiding images within an image. So if we look at this guy here, we've got a frog sitting, in the lake. There's some brush behind him. And when we turn it sideways, now we have a horse's head. So these are kind of fun where artists learn how to hide pictures in pictures. So we've got a frog and we've got a horse. Some of the ones that we're going to learn how to make have to do with some very basic visual effects. So the first effect has to do with parallel lines, okay? So if you look here, this is called a chevron, right? It's that little arrow shape. And when we look at them all put together, it kind of creates movement. When we put two together, now we're starting to get like this three-dimensional effect, like it's raising and it's lowering. We put three together, now we've got some weird things happening with our eyeballs. It's actually starting to look, I'm gonna kind of adjust this a little bit, like these are smaller on this end and larger on this end. But I've marked on a Post-it note the length of the line. Okay, so it lines up here. It's the same as this line. It's the same as this line. It's the same as this middle line. They're all exactly the same size, but our eye is interpreting them differently. So you can see when we put them together down here, you get this very kind of like wobbly line effect, right? So you can't tell if the lines are straight or crooked. Sometimes they look straight, sometimes they look crooked. This one is called the classic Zollner illusion, based on the person who kind of started to mess with these. So again, we have that same chevron pattern, but now we're adding lines of different, like a dark line and a light line at the different points, okay? And we're starting to get different effects. You can also do it with interlocking the chevrons and you're going to get different effects. So we can see those down here. So when you look at it, you can't quite tell if the lines are straight, if they're wobbly, if they're bending. Kind of is like, makes your eyes a little bit like, what am I seeing? So it's distorting your vision. This is a leaning effect. Okay, so what we have here is a simple checkerboard, and we have this simple dashed line, right? Dark light, dark light, dark light, okay? So now we take those two things and we put them together. We've got our checkerboard with the line dark light in between them. Well, when we put it all together, the lines no longer look like they're straight, but in fact, these are still exact cubes. So if I were to take my Post-it note again and mark a square, when I hold a square next to any one of these, it helps our eye to focus on the fact that it is in fact a little square and not these kind of parallelogram looking shapes. Okay, so that's how you create a leaning effect. Simple checkerboard, simple dashed line put together. And you can put those together in lots of different ways. Okay. This one, they're using dashed plus signs. And it's going to create a similar effect. So, all sorts of things. This is one that I like. It creates the effect that it's bulging, right? So here we have a simple grid where we're starting with a full-size square and slowly getting smaller. And then when we create this checkerboard by filling in every other box, it looks like we've got this curved surface. So you can see how when we start to combine them, we're getting different shapes. If you put 4 of those patterns together, you get this really cool, it looks like you've got a dome here on your page. Here we've got 4 of them together, okay? So we're skewing our perspective. This is how to create a tunnel effect, okay? To make it look like it's going back into space. So we're starting with a square and an even number of lines all the way around, okay? You can't do it with an odd number. They chose 10 degrees. You don't actually have to measure the degrees if you count it out and make sure they're more or less even. At least that's my experience. Then your squares are getting smaller. They give you the number 64%. And I will scan in these pages so that you can come back and refer to them. But you're starting with a bigger square and then a little. So you can see this is wider, smaller, 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 smaller. By getting smaller and smaller, it makes it look like we're going back into space. So you can kind of see how the lines are set up here. And then when you do that checkerboard design, now it looks like you're going back into space. If you've been to the Field Museum in their bug exhibit, you walk through a hallway where they've designed it like this, so you feel like you're walking into a smaller space because you're walking, the whole hallway is painted like this, but you're actually not. So now to get on to how to make them. You have a lot of different options into how you approach them. This is one I have that's not fully done, but I'm getting there. So I decided to create some spheres, right? Some 3-dimensional circles. And then I started to create a tunnel effect. So I wanted to show you a little bit. Now I'm gonna be using a permanent marker here, but this actually works with any marker or colored pencil. After viewing the survey of what supplies you guys have accessible to you, this is a project that will work with any of the supplies that you have at home. And if for any reason the supplies that you have available to you are a problem, then you can just shoot me an email and I can leave supplies at the school. And you can pick them up during the lunch pickup hours. So even over spring break, we're still serving lunch 5 days. So that's just a good something to think about for next week if you need lunches provided for you. The lunch ladies and Mr. Trotter, Mr. Bolfer have been doing a great job of making sure that you guys have access. And I know some of you might even be picking up at different schools because it's closer to your house. And that's totally fine too. So what you're doing when you're checkerboarding is you're filling in every other square, okay? So if I colored in this shape black, that means I leave this one white, which means this guy here, even though we're only seeing part of it, would get colored in. And I would continue to do that all the way around, and it's gonna help amplify the effect of this illusion. And then the other thing that we would do to amplify the effect is to shade. So you can take a colored pencil and you would shade it darker, and then you would slowly lighten your pressure as you move out and get lighter. And so you're gonna visually amplify that effect. So the nice thing about using Sharpie is that if you have a permanent marker available, it doesn't have to be Sharpie brand, any permanent marker, which I do sell at the dollar store, but I don't even know if those are open, because that's a store you'd have to go into. But like I said, any marker, even if it's a Crayola black marker, something dark, it doesn't matter if your colored pencil goes a little bit above it. So you can kind of see that you can start to amplify that effect. And I will include a finished example in the projects for tomorrow, okay? So I'm gonna give you a lot of options on what kind of optical illusion that you choose to create, okay? And I have some steps here that I will include this packet. You could do a name bubble. So you're creating step by step, making a sphere, and putting some bubble letter names, and you checkerboard it to make that illusion. Okay, it's a little tricky because you got to checkerboard with the letters as well. Another option is to create a cube. Okay, so you're going to make it look like a three-dimensional cube, and you can put your name or word, anything, and it helps to amplify the illusion because you can see that the letters get bigger and then they get smaller. You could do one of these where you're creating a tunnel effect. So this is a very kind of basic one, right? This is with circles. This guy is a little more spider web shape, but you're still getting that tunnel effect. You could do the infinite triangle or square, works with either. So this is an infinite triangle. Each time you're turning it and drawing another one on the inside. This is an infinite square. Patty, knock it off. Sorry, my foster dog has suddenly been crabby today. This is a double infinite square. So you can see that this black one is the first square, and then they turned the white one, turned it, and they kept getting smaller, and they're still checkerboarding, okay? There's lots of other effects. This one, they've used 4 lines, and they're not actually checkerboarding on this one, but they're using the 4 edges as they shade it in to kind of skew with that. So it is, you know, kind of changing the shape. You've got like tunnel effect here. That one's made differently. You can have a never-ending spiral. This one is Movement in Squares by Bridget Riley, so it actually looks like it's a crevice, right? So it's like going down and then it's coming back up. So like it's a canyon almost. And she does that simply by getting smaller with the squares and then bigger. These are some examples of some just different kinds, you know, so you can have floating shapes into your tunneling. Another fun one is this guy, and it looks like these lines are kind of bulging out. And then this is a simple one where you're doing a straight up hiding your name or a picture or something by doing the checkerboard effect. So I'm going to give you a little demonstration on how to get started with some of these. So this guy picked my vanishing point and I drew my lines out. This time, I'm actually going to draw with a Sharpie just so you can see really good. I'm going to pick where I want my vanishing point, and I need to draw an even number of lines, approximately evenly spaced. So we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now I have a lot of choices. I can do straight lines, I could do curved out lines, or I could do curved in lines. I think that I'm going to do curved in lines. So I'm going to go around like a spider web. Okay, and then these guys get further out. And then these guys get further out. And then over here, I have to visually just kind of estimate where my marker would be. I don't really want to draw on my dining room table. But you always have to meet up with where you left off. Now this one I didn't. This one I probably wouldn't have one, so if I'm getting bigger each time, you would probably only see that mark. Okay, so I've got that. Now this is a pretty simple one. I didn't add as many lines, so the effect's not going to be as profound. But I would start and I would checkerboard, 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 checkerboard. So I'm coloring in every other one. So in this row, this one was black, so this one is white. This is white, that means this next one is black. When you're using markers, permanent markers, regular markers, any kind of markers, generally you want to go with an outline and fill technique. So So you outline the edges and then you fill it in. You want to color in a consistent direction. So I'm making my outline a little bit thicker all the way around. And then I'm gonna fill in. One thing to know is that if you use any kind of marker super fast, like scribbly marks, you're going to dry the marker out before it's actually dead. Put another sheet of paper in here, make sure I'm not bleeding through to the table. Most of you had your sketchbooks. I think there's a handful of sketchbooks still at Hester waiting to be picked up. So you should have white paper in that. But if you don't, other paper will work. You just have to make sure that if it's thin, there you go. And I'm going to do this last shape, and then I think you get the effect. So there's going to be a lot of levels to different challenge. If you are a more accomplished drawer, you can do your own research on the Chromebook, onto different optical illusions, and learn how to draw them. There's all sorts of stuff. So we've got that. If I wanted to do a giant sphere, I'm going to draw again in Sharpie just so that you can see. If you were to do this, you would draw in pencil. But we're going to start by planning first because that's what we always do. Okay, not a perfect oval, but you're going to make an X or a cross in the middle. And how you make it look 3D is that you're curving, but this is your widest section. So you're going to continue to curve, but this one is smaller. And you're going to continue to get smaller. You're going to do the same thing on the other side, making your shapes approximately match. There's not going to be perfect, especially because I didn't draw a perfect round shape. It's not very even. It's a little lopsided. It's kind of like a pumpkin. This guy's going to grow out this way. And then we're going to grow out. Went outside the line there a little bit. Draw the same thing here. And you can already start to see that it's starting to look like a three-dimensional sphere. And then if I wanted to write something, maybe I want to write something inspiring. The trick when you're doing this to help with the checkerboard part is to avoid what I call a border merger. So a border merger would be where the line of your letter, oh, that was not a very good A, but we're gonna go with it. Where if it's a vertical line, it doesn't match up perfectly with any of the other lines. So it's kind of a weird A, but this is why you wouldn't draw with Sharpie first. Okay, and then if I was coloring in this section here, I'm rushing a little bit because I'm sure you're starting to check out a little bit. I get it. Blabbering on and on. And a lot of this you can get from the instructions that I will attach. This is white, so if that's white, this is dark here. And it just gets a lot harder as you get to the smaller sections. If this one was white, this section is dark. So anytime you hit a line, you have to change. So I'm going to give you your option. What I would do is you're going to do a sketch today. You're going to submit the picture. We're going to try a different way of uploading it to Google Classroom so that they're all in the same place, because I missed some people's submissions over the last few times because they were attached differently. And then this was white, so this one has to be dark. And so on and so forth. This is light, so this little triangle is dark. Okay? Have fun with it. I will post more directions on your process. Thanks so much.